Hi, Aleksander. Welcome to Walk in the Park.
Thank you for having me.
It's amazing to meet in Oslo, a bit outside Oslo in the forest. That's an absolutely new area for me. And it's also the idea of Walk in the Park podcast. We meet founders for a walk outside in the nature to talk about their journey, talk about your journey, how you started, how you do things, what inspired you in the first place. Let's walk.
Yes, of course.
And the first question I usually ask is if you have walk and talks often in your life, is it a part of a culture or your habits?
You mean walking meetings or?
Walking meetings.
Yeah, so I do quite a few actually, or try to as many as I can. Unfortunately, it's not as many as I should be doing. Usually, whenever I'm at like big conferences and stuff, we rent a room and then people come to us to do some pitching or to talk about various partnerships. But whenever I do have like walking meetings, I find them to be quite productive because, yeah, when you do an activity together, it's easier to relax a little bit more and then to kind of just like the conversations, they evolve a little bit more naturally.
You are a co-founder and COO at Sky Mavis and Axie Infinity. So what else can you tell us about yourself and what do you do now? What is your focus?
Yeah, I mean, so I think I have many different hats, do many different things. In Sky Mavis, you know, I am the COO and also the chairman, and I do a lot of the business related activities. So usually what you would find that the CEO does. So for example, I was the one who was leading all our fundraising rounds and kind of leading the business strategy side of things. And then I also do many type of investments on my personal, as my personal kind of just person. So more of an angel investor. And then, yeah, I guess now also soon to be a family father and try to help out my friends and, you know, just do normal random things, I guess. But overall, I think that my life for the past 9 years or something like that has been very, very focused on trying to build this company, building something of value, like building something that can last for a long time.
And about your personal investing in the gaming space as well, or
it's mostly in crypto, I would say, more broadly speaking than just gaming. So I think gaming is very hit driven and volatile, and, you know, particularly crypto gaming, which is not only trying to innovate on the crypto side, but a little bit also on the gaming side, it becomes quickly very difficult. I think my expertise is also tied very into the crypto side, where a lot of it is about incentive design and how do you make sure that, people are kind of doing what you want inside these platforms, and so they get rewarded in tokens or other ways like that. So that's like where I really try to focus my time on. So crypto and gaming, but I can do crypto investments without gaming as well.
So let's go back before you started Sky Mavis and Axie Infinity was born. So 7.5 years ago, kind of, right? So what was the inspiration? Why you started a company?
So actually it's funny because my father was an entrepreneur, or he was building smaller companies, you can say, right? He's from Tromsø, which is a very small town up north, and he always wanted to make something, I feel like, bigger than he was able to do because he had limitations on, you know, the internet wasn't as big as it was then, and he couldn't find the right people to work with, but he was always innovating, and he was always working super hard. He worked so much that I thought, I'm never going to be an entrepreneur, because if you work this hard and you never really create something massive of value, then probably it makes more sense to spend your time with your family or with friends and you can do something else. But the older I got, the more I started to see that I wanted to do things a little bit differently than maybe things were in society today, but mostly just like from things that I really cared about. And growing up, a lot of that was gaming. So it was always like, if there aren't any tournaments, then I'm just going to create the tournaments. And if there isn't any community, then I'm just going to try to create the community and create a place where, you know, I was trying to solve a problem for myself. And then I felt like that became a thing gradually throughout my life where, I was always trying to be a part of many things and doing something beyond just participating. And I think it all kind of combined into, you know, trying to build Axie and Sky Mavis, which is, you know, some time ago now. But yeah, I was participating in another Norwegian startup. I was building a crypto game as well. It was very, very early. And then eventually I started to get to know these other co-founders of Sky Mavis and Axie. I just thought that they were much better. So that's why I was like, should probably work with these guys. Then maybe we can create something that is more in line with my vision, where I can have even bigger impact. So
Yeah, how did you meet each other with your co-founders?
So we actually played the first crypto game that ever was created, which is called CryptoKitties. So that was like a small community of maybe like 10,000 people. And the people in that game, they got to know each other. And that's where I met these other guys who were super talented in many different directions. And I actually ended up hiring the creator or the original kind of architect or the CTO of Sky Mavis to build a marketplace for my other startup. And then he did it, and he did it in like 2 weeks. And then I thought, wait a minute, like if this guy can make this marketplace alone in 2 weeks, I should rather just build with him rather than actually working with these other guys who couldn't really build something. To me, that was like, okay. Then he asked me as well if I wanted to join and create this other company. And I said, well, you know, I'd seen that he could build, and we had a little bit of traction with Axie. So that's why I decided to join as a co-founder, and I moved to Vietnam, and that's like very early 2018. And I lived there for all the way up to COVID pretty much.
So you moved to Vietnam because of starting company?
Yeah, I would have moved anywhere. I had no idea where he was from originally when we started talking, and when he said eventually that he was from Vietnam, I was like, okay, that's probably cool. I have never been there, but at that point, I was hungry to do something to try to have an impact, and I felt like, the whole when I was 18, and now I'm 38, but when I was 18 to 20, it felt like the internet had already a little bit been figured out, and I was too young maybe to participate in that startup wave. And then I was starting to get a little bit older and smarter, and I was like, okay, this is probably a good opportunity to try to have an impact and to build something real. So the timing was right, and I was, incredibly hungry to just work a lot. So that's why I moved there. I didn't have any friends or didn't have anything, family, whatever. It didn't matter, because I was like, okay, worst thing that can happen, we failed with the company, but then I would at least have learned a lot. I always had this very strong belief that people should own their own data. I don't like that Facebook owns our data. And I feel like crypto really enables ownership in a brand new way for people. So to me, that's like why I was very interested in crypto from the beginning. And then it was just a combination of crypto and gaming, which then again led me to be like, okay, this is probably what I should be doing with my life.
Really sounds like a great motivation and a great drive. I listened to a podcast with you and Shifter, and you were talking exactly about that, owning your own data. And then when you create a figure, then you own it, you have it in your wallet, and then you can decide what you want to do with it, and like the whole concept around that. And I think it's brilliant, and I totally support you on the owning your own data. But looking back to the time you moved, and then you just described how you were hungry and how you did that, but you don't regret, right? You think it was a right decision, because you also were moving outside your comfort zone, your country. And do you believe that helped you in a way to be even more driven?
I don't think that... there are a few... maybe Sky Mavis could have succeeded from if all the founders were here in Norway too, I think maybe we could have succeeded from Norway just by having those people there. But we could have not have succeeded based on the salary point, because it's just cheaper to have people in Vietnam. So to me, it's like, yeah, this is a great opportunity. And of course, I've never regretted it since. Of course, we succeeded, but we could have also easily have failed because there was no market. It didn't exist. Like, we launched our first games and we had 100 users or something like that. And, every investor I talked to, they're just like, no, this is not a thing. And for the very few meetings that I could even get, because we didn't know any investors. So it was very, very difficult. But then eventually started finding a little bit more traction, and things started to work out in the same IP, but with a different type of game. And then we did some specific innovation. So what we did with Axie is there was a combination of many different kind of innovation points that happened for us to succeed. So with Axie, we innovated on token or distribution of tokens to players through playing the game. And at the same time, decentralized finance, which is another thing in crypto, had just been appearing as well. So that's another innovation. And the third one was the scaling. So the scaling ceiling had been lifted by us moving or creating our own blockchain. So these three things together actually enabled the rise of Axie, which then of course was tied into the game, but the game itself wasn't actually the innovative part. So you could say that, while we're game developers, the thing that we do the best is probably synthesizing different things and then innovating and kind of combining them into something that creates a brand new experience for the customer, so that they can play a different type of game or be a part of something new.
I wanted to follow up on that part of, in the beginning you were just only 100 users and it was like tougher and many no's from investors and everything. And you mentioned that on one of the interviews as well, like Nintendo's story or some other game developer story, that they have some other games, like they have several games, maybe one or two, which are not going up, right? Which just sometimes they maybe should do that. And also the game developers often take maybe like too much focus on the development, not on distribution, and then on next games they become better. Do you believe for you it was also like you've become more like experienced, you started to understand how things are, and that's why you kind of turned the direction? Was it a pivot on the way, or?
I mean, not necessarily. I would say, like, as I said, the innovation is less on the game side and more on kind of all of these things together, where, you know, we ended up creating something new. So the timing was right for sure, and we were the first in the world to do that, which then again set the foundation for a distribution platform, because we had suddenly got like all of these users. So what we're trying to do is, like, we're gathering as many users as we can, and then we are trying to distribute those users into other games beyond just the first game that we have, so that those games can attract new users into crypto, and those users then land into our products, so we can make money on that, and then also share that revenue with the other developers. So it's been a lot about, like, you build a platform through content, and then the question is, do you have enough users to get to escape velocity, which is quite difficult. So even now, you know, we have anywhere from 1 million to 1.5, let's say between daily and weekly users. But maybe it's not enough even to actually hit like true escape velocity, because a lot of it still depends on the underlying products, which need to innovate more, probably on the crypto side, so that the consumer can still experience something net new, which is actually where we're spending more of our time on right now. So for me, I talk to many different game developers, even our own internal teams, to try to make them focus more on, you know, just doing new things within the crypto space and crypto gaming, rather than doing the same thing over and over again, which hasn't really worked. So an interesting metric is, after Axie, $15 billion has been deployed into crypto gaming. And Axie is still the most successful crypto game of all time. And then it's like, well, how is that even possible with that amount of money? You would think that, you know, money is just like the solution to any problem. Or not really, but, you know, it's usually a good way to solve a problem. You put a lot of money into it, and if you have the right people, that, you know, usually gets you somewhere. But in this case, it just hasn't been real, because, you know, people have been, you know, maybe too much money in the space, got into the wrong hands, and those builders, maybe they've been focusing on the wrong thing. So I feel like we kind of have to go back to basics and be like, okay, this is where we innovated. Can we kind of repeat that, or do like a step-by-step approach to do it again, to get a repeatable process, create a framework for innovation, which is super difficult.
Do you think about yourself as a structured person?
I think like I'm in between somewhere. I can be very structured in the things that I like. And I do some operate. I mean, so the funny part is I'm the COO at Sky Mavis, but
yeah, I had
in reality, it's just not what I necessarily do. It was just the title that kind of ended up, because I was like always supposed to be kind of the second in command, or kind of be the counterpart to Trung, who is the CEO. But then I ended up doing more CEO stuff, more strategic stuff, more business development work. So that title for me is not necessarily correct. So whenever I have to do like really deep levels of operations and stuff, it actually drains my energy. I can do it. It makes sense for me to do that sometimes, but it's not necessarily as energizing as maybe what I would like it to be when I do other things that are more meaningful.
Yeah. So what are the other things which are more meaningful? Is that talking to game developers, focusing on consumer, your favorite part, or what is your favorite part?
Yeah, so I like winning, even if that is very broad, right? But I think like if I can do really high leverage activities, so connect the right pieces with each other and make sure that they are doing the right thing, that's usually very interesting for me, to make sure that we are spending our resources and time on the right things, and also getting a good deal. I think that getting a good deal is quite satisfying, making sure that you can just push things in the right direction, and you know, that the company doesn't take advantage of, that the timing is right, that whenever there is an opportunity, that we seize that to the maximum and use it I think that to me is actually quite interesting. So for example, I'm traveling to China in 2 weeks or so, which should be interesting. So more of a kind of a long shot strategic opportunity. But I find that to be quite compelling because these could be like major unlocks for the company. I'm not that interested necessarily in like 20-30% iterations, because I think that it's not going to be good enough for the startup like world that we live in. I think we need like bigger jumps in terms of productivity, in terms of just results. So 20-30% of something, let's say if you have like a small result or you have like 100 users, if you then get 30% new users over like a couple of months, like that's another 30 users. Like that's not really getting you anywhere. Mm-hmm. You have to do that for years and years and years and years. And of course, like at the end of the day, that's going to be super helpful, because if you get to 1 million, then 30% growth is obviously amazing. But that's not the name of the game. The name of the game here has to be like massive jumps until you get to a point where you can, kind of have the framework, and then you can maybe leave it to someone else to actually optimize. So optimization is not that interesting to me. More kind of big leaps. Yeah, and then I can actually rather empower those people who are doing the optimizations when we've kind of reached those big leaps.
What's important, one quality, if you can name, to be able to do big leaps, big jumps? Like, what is the quality you believe helps you?
I think actually it's a combination of many things, right? So storytelling is definitely important. Being able to get people on board with the vision that you see or the future that you see, but at the same time also being able to kind of understand that this is somewhat doable within the next, let's say, 12 to 24 months. Because there's a lot of storytellers or people that, have amazing ambitions, but there's no execution to actually get like one step. You have to solve one problem at a time. So I think actually understanding the potential for where you're headed, but at the same time also being able to, execute on that in a relatively reasonable time frame is okay. But like, everything usually takes longer than what you would expect, so it's hard to really like be very clear on those strategic or tactical plans.
Following up on that, you just mentioned it can take longer time, it can be hard, and also you just mentioned before about a lot of no's from investors in the beginning. So how do you deal with those? How do you support yourself through those kind of tough times, or when things getting harder and setbacks and stuff?
Yeah, I really think that this is kind of a type of person who you just have to keep pushing through those things. It doesn't really get any easier, no matter how long you get in the startup journey, because whenever you're a founder in something, when you're like at the highest level, it always feels like you're just going from one problem to the next, to the next, to the next, because problems just always surface to the top. So you will, even if you solve one thing, it's like there's another hard thing to do. Someone now is underperforming, this part of the business is not working. Suddenly now we have like some security exposure. Suddenly now there's whatever sort of problem, right? So I think you really have to kind of get some energy from like solving hard problems and like facing that head on, and be comfortable with not seeing immediate results, even if that is super difficult for me as well, because I'm quite impatient. I want to do things now, and I feel like being very impatient and action oriented is also another requirement to be an entrepreneur. But that is like very, how can I say it? It's output dependent. So it's something that you do. Mm-hmm. Like, so I like people who are output dependent rather than, so you can basically do things and then the results will come a little bit later. But I like focusing on what I can control. And I think that's really the key of this. If you're good at focusing on what you can control, then eventually the results will come, which is also tied into grit and all those other things. Of course, like given that you are, working on the right thing, moving towards the strategic thing that is somewhat reasonable to get to over time.
Back to before you started the company, you've been gaming yourself since you were a kid. So when was the first time? Was it Nintendo, or what was that? How you started to actually with gaming? Your story with gaming. When did it start?
I think I was always playing games my entire life, and
Since what age?
Could it be like 5 or 6? I think I got my first Nintendo, the Super Nintendo, but even before that, I was playing with friends or trying to, go to visit them and try to use their computers. I remember I was using some Amiga from one of my cousins, and I thought it was just the best thing since ever, basically. So I have quite of an addictive personality. So, and that does not only work with games, but usually many other things as well. So if I'm like, I can easily get like very obsessed with something, and then I just do it all the time until I feel like I've kind of mastered that to an extent, or kind of reached a plateau where it's very difficult to get to the next stage. But even then, like, obsession usually pulls you through where you can just like, and I think that's like where games are really good with the dopamine hits, where you basically, the design of the game, it gives you the correct dopamine hits at whichever time, so that, you know, you can just continue past like difficult times when you get to whatever kind of skill ceiling, or you lose the game or something like that. So I spend a lot of time thinking about those design patterns in some of the games that we are working with as well. So I think my gaming history gives me a unique perspective on the industry, and I think just understanding how or what kind of games that, you know, it's a lot about gut feeling as well. Or, you know, this world that we live in, like with AI, all the data, everything is so available everywhere. So you have to have like some core belief of what is it that's entertaining for you. And then you kind of have to extrapolate that and say that, okay, that might be entertaining for me, so other people in my region, you know, might like those similar things. So I think that's also a lot about product development too. Is like someone has to design these things. Someone has to kind of impact the world with their vision. And that is usually how the world kind of, over time, like the world starts using those products, and then they kind of influence the world in that direction.
Are you still obsessed with Sky Mavis?
Yes, yes. I think, you know, to me, Sky Mavis is definitely my work of my life, so to say. I'm actually trying to push now our team to be even more obsessed with the specific products that we have and focus even more, because when I look back at like the early days of Axie, you know, all the founders were so obsessed with Axie and trying to make it work, and we were doing all like so many different things, trying to get like big partnerships. I remember we were like 100 people, 100 players, and landed like a partnership with Samsung or something, and that was amazing. And we did other things as well, which is just kind of massively. It seems like it would be impossible when you're such a small company to like land these big partnerships. But like with a singular focus and just massive amounts of work, hours basically you need to spend thinking about the problem, I think that amazing things can happen. So I don't think you have to be that many people. Right now with 200, you know, something happens when they grow from like 50 to 200, where, you know, you suddenly get like very focused on middle management, like there's all these corporate things that is very, you know, somehow unproductive, and it doesn't actually create value. It just creates frameworks for success in the long term. But right now, for like specifically for Sky Mavis and Axie, it's just like we need to be able to reinvent ourselves again. And I feel like that's a lot of what startups are about sometimes, is we really need to consistently prove that we have product market fit. If not, the market is going to take that away from you.
How do you do that? Do you have internal people who know how to do that, or you have like structured process, or you use some external help?
No, I don't believe in external help necessarily for that. I think that, you know, that's where the founders probably have to be very involved in it. They have their vision for the future of the world. They have their vision for the future of the company. The product that they're making has to fit into that vision and solve a problem for the consumers around the world. And I think that's really where, you know, that's where the magic happens of building a company. If you don't have a solid product, you don't have a company, right? So you can make all the fancy processes you want. You can have all the right HR people, finance people, like it's all irrelevant in the end, unless the underlying products actually work. People love them, use them. You have a community in our case. So yeah, I think like on our sake, like it takes some time to actually get to that conclusion because it's very easy to think that, oh, we kind of solved the problem. Oh, we can jump to the next stage of problem solving. But you really have to focus on the fundamentals all the time so that you don't lose track of those things.
The co-founding team. What is your experience? You mentioned how you guys met and how was your feeling in the beginning. You were like, oh, this guy just did that in 2 weeks. I want to work with him, right? So what do you believe is important for co-founding team, and how do you find your perfect like match co-founder?
Yeah, I have very strong opinions about that lately, especially like over the, you know, the years as, you know, we found our places even more in the team, and, you know, co-founders have different, you know, beliefs of what they should do, where, you know, they might see the vision of themselves in the company, etc., moving forward. So I think everything is about the beginning and like making sure that you have the right people in the right roles and making sure that you talk about these things with the co-founders that you have. Like only one person can be the CEO, right? I mean, that's a specific thing that is very that needs to be figured out like immediately, of course, and then from there on out, like things kind of scatter down. But I think difficulties happen over time, as some people might develop an ego. I've seen this happen so many times, right, where you kind of need to check your ego, even personally as well, as you start getting success. There is a beginning, right, where things really matter so much, where the roles are like, where you clearly define the roles. People need to know what is the expectation of them, and then it can be, incentives can be fixed with the right type of share structure, right? So that people who have like key founder roles in the company are incentivized properly. Because if things really start to hit traction, it's very difficult to go back and fix those things over time. So let's say like if one founder owns 90% and like 3 other founders own like 3%, and then you raise a couple of rounds and those guys that own too little, they are suddenly super diluted. It's hard for them to really stay motivated over time, right? So I think it's counterintuitive to some early founders where like, oh yeah, I should have as much ownership as I can personally because I'm the one who's doing all the work. But no, you actually have to think about the future, about like how do we incentivize these people in the long term to create value for this company.
Was it easy for you from the beginning to align on the vision, on where you're going, to align on like divide roles and all those things, so you learned on the way later?
I think we learned a lot on the way, and personally, I don't think I'm ever going to be anything else than a CEO of a company, because I think that that's where I like generally find myself being mostly useful. But my thought process with Sky Mavis was like, okay, and Axie was like, okay, I would rather do something here where I can have like maybe a massive impact, and maybe not like be my absolute full like egocentric, kind of fulfill all of those things. But at the same time, I really want to learn. I really want to be a part of this journey, and I feel like the potential is massive. And then over time, we'll see where that goes. But I think like it's about finding people who you can trust and who truly believe that, who put the company first before themselves. And I think that's really the key. And I think we're really good at doing that at Sky Mavis, kind of not having that ego be too present, even when the company was growing massively. And even like when things were failing, for example, during the hack, and like everyone is always focused on how do we solve the problem and how do we get to the next stage, and then we can deal with the other things eventually.
But how do you do that? How do you test people about having too big ego or okay ego? Do you have any tips on that?
I think it's impossible to do that before you start building together, because people say one thing and they behave differently over time, right? I think just time has to be the thing that shows these things, and that's also why we have vesting, right, in these agreements, right? So if someone is not fully motivated to the journey, like say 2 years in, like then they should just leave immediately. I don't have any belief in people doing things like in a halfway manner. I think everything is about focus. Everything is about passion, and if the founding team and the people who are building the company, they're not motivated, then to really give the absolute extra effort to kind of get this thing off the ground, then it's not going to happen at all, because you will start discussing all sorts of dumb things or things that just they don't matter in the long run. So yeah.
But since you mentioned vesting, and that's important to think about this from the beginning, I've heard that a lot from founders, like maybe not that experienced, and young founders, they haven't thought about it in the beginning. They were not that good at negotiating shareholder agreement and all those things, and then they regret on that. So yeah. If you can give just a small tip on that to the young founders, what is important to think about when you start a company and kind of first set up a structure?
Generally speaking, if I'm a solo founder, if I'm going to set up a new company today, of course, find other people who want to create a company with you, who want to solve the same problem that you do, who are in the same field. And I think just being transparent about what you are expecting of them, and you need to say that this is probably going to be a founder journey, it's going to take some time, and then try to just talk over time about ownership stake and try to get those agreements very easily, low-key set up from the beginning. And when I say that, I mean just you can do very simple agreements. You don't have to do these massive shareholder agreements. I think there are great places in Norway who can help you with this. I think Startuplab is probably one of those places. I'm actually an investor in Startuplab. So I think it's great that those places exist here. So doing that, or Innovation Norway, trying to get help in these local communities, I think is really what a lot of startup founders should be doing, because like there's so many people who are interested in helping, and there's so many resources out there that it's not like it's impossible to fail right now. But and when I say that, I mean impossible to fail in terms of setting this up correctly, but you can just use ChatGPT or AI to like, hey, I'm going to start a company. What is the things that I should be doing and not doing? And then you get like generally good pieces of advice, which I think is okay to start with.
Yeah, but you should also be good at asking for advice, or like open for that. And I believe that can be sometimes a challenge for some people. They kind of feel lonely when they start a journey, but they don't know maybe, should I disturb this person? Should I ask? Maybe it's kind of...
I think if there are founders who are like that, they need to stop doing that immediately, because, you know, if you don't ask, you're not going to get any answers. I think like that's like, it sounds like a very Norwegian thing to be like, oh, I'm not going to bother this person. But actually, you know, the only thing that matters is results in that way. Like, I actually like that people are kind of aggressive in some cases, because I'm super aggressive if I want something. And I feel like, to me, that's like, how do we get outsized returns? It's, you have to do sometimes things that is uncomfortable, and that is a great way to get a win that maybe people wouldn't have imagined that you could get even in the first place. So I think it's just get used to getting no. That like is I think very, very important.
That was for you as well, right? When you started to talk to first investors, got a lot of no's, you lose a lot of energy on that, or you were like really quick on, no, I'm not focusing on that, just keep going, keep winning?
It didn't actually never really matter to me getting no from someone like that. Of course, like it feels a little bit sad, but like, what are you going to do about it? Because there's nothing that you can do about them necessarily saying no. You can learn about it, but like that person already said no. I mean, you can keep chasing, but it's actually better to get a fast no than to get a long drawn out no. That's just like not where you want to be. Yeah, so I think like just getting used to those no's, and then I think every founder is a salesperson to an extent. And if you're not a salesperson, if you're a technical founder, then you need to get a business person to help you or be a part of this. And I think too many technical people think that it's easy to just sell or to tell the story or to do that. I mean, I've had so many deals with like technical founders, and when things actually get tough, you know, if you're a technical founder, sometimes it's hard to get into the business mindset because you're so focused on solving the problem. But like a business person will not do that. They will like always be focused on like the high level, because they can't actually solve the underlying problem, right? So you really need that kind of focus on the details, and then the focus on like the strategic thing. Some technical founders can do that, but that's probably not, from my point of view, that's probably not the best use of their time. I think that there are precious few people who can actually build amazing and great things from a product side and from an engineering side. I think those people should actually find great business people that they can trust, who can kind of execute on the business side, and then kind of give them more freedom, right? So you're always trying to buy time, buy freedom basically, or buy yourselves out of the things that you find is difficult to do. So because then you can spend more time on what is most important for the company. I think everything is about leverage. If you can leverage your time in the right place, leverage the right people, then you can make something amazing. But if you as a technical founder, you spend a shitload of time on the business stuff, that's like probably a bad idea. And if you're a business person and you suddenly have to spend a lot of time on doing technical, like it just doesn't make any sense.
A founder mindset. And I've heard on several interviews, you mentioned several things around that. You mentioned some founder traits, which are important, and we'll come back to that. But now the mindset. As I've heard, you were like talking about that example, how you were like thinking that if some people could do that, why we can't do that? Like Norwegian ecosystem, and that people think maybe too small, too slow. They think, okay, we start here, we go to Sweden and stuff like that. But then thinking big sometimes is a challenge. But you did completely the opposite. We're thinking big from day one, and like for you, it seems like for you it was like just the only way to go. It's like natural for you. Or how is that?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to what I said initially about my father kind of spending a lot of his time in like a small market, or just, I feel like, you know, spending time on the wrong thing is like just terrible, because you don't, no matter how well you do, you end up getting like a low results, right? So I think what I'm usually good at is actually spending my time on the right thing, which is like what could be the most high leverage thing that I could do right now that could influence my life, the company in any sort of direction, right? And I always have some kind of plan for, okay, if this succeeds, it could be massive somehow. You know, most of those things, they never they never work. Everything, you know, but I think you have to have some kind of idea. And then I feel like I got lucky and had good timing with Sky Mavis, where it ended up just really working. But most of the things, they don't work, right? Because it could be me, could be the people that I'm working with, could be whatever else happens. The market goes down, it's COVID. Like, it doesn't necessarily matter. But I'm very, I don't really mind that, you know, those things don't work, because I think that if I have a good enough, like many enough opportunities, some of those things will work for me. And that's proven to be right, at least from my person. As long as I have time, I can stay in the market, I can do many experiments, and it's not like complete YOLO, right? Where I'm just like, oh, let's just do that random thing. There has to be some kind of thought process where I'm spending my time. If not, it's like you're trying to, you know, you're fishing in this place, right? There is no fish here, obviously. So you have to be able to go to like a place where there seems to be fish, and then you need to try to catch a fish, to use an analogy like that.
So talking about how you prioritize your time and your day, how many time you spend on preparing, analyzing, and thinking of what direction to go, how much time you kind of spend on executing, and how do you build your day?
Yeah, I think every day is very flexible for me. I think usually Mondays or Tuesdays are the most set, because that's when we have team meetings. We talk about, it's very operationally focused, right? We talk about, okay, how are the teams that are building with us doing? Can we influence them in some way? What are the problems that's like coming up in the company? Are there payments to be made, or whatever, things that, you know, just needs to happen? And then throughout the week, things have a tendency to slow down a little bit. So I try to have meeting-free days where I can just focus fully on letting my mind wander a little bit and be around the things that I think is going to be most high impact, right? So I think you have to make time to be a little bit bored, rather than only like having meaningful. I mean, I have some meeting like days that are full of meetings, but to me that doesn't. That's not really when the kind of the magic happens in my head. Spending time with great people, talking to them, learning from them, that I think is where I can get a lot of inspiration. And sometimes when I talk about problems, I solve them when I'm talking to them. So if I draw a comparison to where we were with Axie, when we found like real product market fit, and, you know, there were hundreds of thousands of players coming in, let's say on any given week even, there's no time to do anything else than to operate, right? So that was basically just me, my mind saying, okay, this is the most high leverage thing that can be done. I have to do it. So I did everything I could, and I was working, I don't know, 15 hours a day and almost no sleep, just only trying to make sure that the servers were on, trying to control what I could. And I think that's also a big, and everyone did that. So, and I feel like that was also a big reason why we were able to keep the servers on for such a long time and actually scale to like 2.7 million users before things started to kind of slow down a little bit. So yeah, it's just like where, and I think that's also about like a judgment call for the founders themselves. It's like, where do I need to spend my time? And like looking back at it, I should probably have spent even more time hiring, finding the right people, even building a team here in Norway around me. I think is something that I wish I would have done a little bit sooner. We did some of it in Norway here, but not enough, I would say.
Following up on hiring and like people and culture, what is that for you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think culture is one of the most important thing that any company has, and in terms of, do you have the right people working on the right things at the right time is, you know, generally speaking, the key. So finding those people who have a passion for your company and who can actually influence that in the right direction and have the skill for it and are motivated to do it, I think those are the key things. And, you know, I think I wish that I'd been better at doing that in Norway, because I think we have many like talented people here. But, you know, we actually went the route of like having most of our engineers and product people in Vietnam. And when I'm building up my team from the business side, I don't need people here in Norway to necessarily do that. I can go like very, very global. But I feel like when you're building things, when you are on the product side or engineering side, it's somehow more helpful to have people around you, because you need to explain the vision, explain the product strategy, explain everything that you're trying to do. And then you need to be there every single day to make sure that these people are actually doing it in the way that you want it to do. So that's like, whenever I'm in Vietnam, I'm more very much on the ground with the team, trying to see, okay, this is where I am seeing this headed, right? So
back to you starting playing pretty early, like 5, 6 years old, as you mentioned. I'm a mom of 3 boys, and we have this talks a lot about like how we should help kids to regulate. And of course, this is the future; they want to play, and there's a lot of positive about that. But also, how should we regulate? Should we do that or not? And also, gaming, is it a positive thing or negative thing? So how was that in your family?
My mother hated gaming. They bought me like an early Nintendo, but then I got like super obsessed with it. So I had like all of the rules. I could not play more than X amount of hours every day. And eventually when I got a computer too, they cut the internet, they cut everything. So, because you don't want a son who's only gaming, right? And I still like being outside, and, we went skiing and we went all of these things.
So you did some other things, right?
Of course,
at the same time, like
and
sport
I played football. My father was a taekwondo coach as well. So, we were working out, doing all of those things as well. But it was not, it's just like, where is your natural obsession? So I think it's very difficult for many parents to deal with that. But I think if you can, inspire your kids to do something else beyond just actually playing the games, creating something in the games, I think that's really where, at least I found that because I was really good at the games, but and I represented Norway in some of them, but at the end of the day, I was like, I'm not going to be a pro gamer. So I used my skill set to start commentating a little bit and started creating things inside those industries. And I feel like that's really where kind of a little bit set me to the path of, I need to do something else here than just play these games. And I think like getting that creator mindset in as early as you can into the kids, I think that's really important. So if they can play a game like Roblox, I guess, where there is user-generated content or they learn about creation tools, I think that is really very, very beneficial in rather than just playing a game and kind of consuming the content. So that's what I would, I guess, focus on if I was a parent.
Following up on people qualities. So you mentioned in the beginning you like winning. Mm-hmm. And that's competitiveness. And where is this coming from? Did you learn that about yourself when you started to play games a lot, or through sport, or when did you find that?
Yeah, to me, being competitive has always kind of been in my nature. I'm not sure like if you can kind of fabricate that, where it really depends on what you are as a person. But I feel like if you can hire someone who has been, competing at a fairly high level in whatever that might be, whether it's a sport, an e-sport, it doesn't necessarily matter. Like, those people probably have the obsession that's required and the grit that's required to try to build something beyond just a normal company. Mm-hmm. Because there's so many like hardships, so many back and forths that you have to tackle all the time. And if you're not ready for that, and if you don't have that kind of grit that you sometimes can get while playing games or playing hard games, then I think it's likely that you are going to give up. It's just one way to kind of develop, I would say, like that type of personality.
Tackling back and forth and like setbacks and all those things. And you also mentioned the hack situation, right? You had that in 2022. Mm-hmm. So what was that for you personally, and how did you deal with that? Was it emotionally difficult for you personally?
Yeah, definitely. It's funny because now sometimes when I talk to other founders or investors and talk about like the fact that we were hacked for such a big amount, and everyone's like, oh, how is the company still here? And of course, like when that happened, it was very like, okay, are we going to survive or not? And how do we tackle the problem at like the smallest level? So just like one brick at a time, which is, I feel like, generally is how you solve big problems. It's like, if you look at the whole, like we're going to get back 600 million, it seems impossible, but maybe we can get like 15 here and 20 there. Can we do some fundraising round? Can we sell some tokens? And eventually, kind of chip away at the problem until it becomes manageable. Of course, it was super hard because there was still a million things that needed to be done, but we got to the end of it. I was super proud of that, of course. It's like, that's probably one of the hardest things in my life. So I think, it's good that we got out of it, but definitely it impacts the entire company. And sometimes I'm like, well, because we, basically refunded the users about $370 million from our balance sheet. And if we didn't do that, we would have another $370 million today, which could have been, a vastly different company. But I also believe that, the more constraints you have, sometimes that is actually a good thing, because it means that you need to find creative solutions, which kind of goes back to what I said about companies sometimes having too much money. It means that, if you have a lot of money, you'll spend it. The constraints, they have sometimes it just manages to fit the problem. So if you say that you have $2 million to solve a problem, okay, it's going to take 2. If you say you have 10, then it's taking 10, right? And I feel like Elon Musk is actually really great at kind of calming down the problem and getting to the core of it, where it's just like, okay, these are the constraints, solve the problem with those constraints. And if it's impossible to do it, then we'll have to go back and see where exactly does it break and how do we can we solve that problem at an even lower level.
Were you looking at him as a role model at that time, or how did you actually find the way to go and to take this decision to do refunds and also this whole?
No, I think that there was no way for us to survive as a company without actually refunding the customers, because if they didn't get their money back, the IP would be dead, the community would be dead. There would be no way for us to monetize beyond it. So either we was try to get it back or kind of bankrupt the company. So there was, we just had to try to solve the problem. So,
Yeah. And as one of the other founders mentioned, there is always a way to turn around, even when you feel like you're close to bankruptcy. You feel the same?
Yeah, of course. I think that these problems that we face along the way, sometimes it seems impossible, of course, but usually sometimes I try to put myself into the head of being a better entrepreneur than myself. So it's like, wait a minute, what would someone else who was even better than me do in this situation? And I try to say that maybe if I was better, would I be spending my time in this way? Would I be thinking about this? Would I be complaining? Not that I rarely complain about things, but sometimes it's natural for human beings to be like, oh, why is things so hard? But really the best people, they only focus on solving their problems rather than complaining, and then they can complain about something in the future when they grow older or when you're not building a business, because it's really not the place to be complaining, or you should only focus on what you can control and what is the most ideal path to solve these problems.
Exactly. And in one of the interviews, I remember you also mentioned curiosity as one of the important founder traits, if I remember correctly. So why is that?
No, I think it goes back to what I said when we were walking about how do you actually have, when you're thinking about the future, when you have some kind of strategic vision, or you think about storytelling, the opportunity space forward, if you're not a curious person, you don't learn what's happening in the market, you don't see opportunity. And if you don't see opportunity, how can you actually try to envision where the future is headed? So that's about curiosity and actually opening your mind into what's possible, because if not, then you just end up trying to make something that someone else has already made. The key has to be to combine what's possible in the market to create something net new for the people that to serve a new customer base, which then again can be an amazing company. That's how I think about it.
That sounds great. When the situation gets tough, like the situation with Hack or other situations, if you have any rituals you built for yourself or you've been doing from the beginning, how you help yourself being grounded or maybe pick yourself up. Do you have those
I don't
routines?
really have any rituals in that sense. I think over the past few years, I try to be a little bit more healthy, walks, didn't try to go to the gym and that kind of stuff. But, my ritual, I guess, is just work, because I always felt that when I was younger, I felt that I was a lazy person because I didn't work enough. I was always looking for the easiest solution or the solution that would solve the problem the fastest. So I can very often think about those solutions that are kind of the lazy person solution, but then I've done that for a few hours. I just have to force myself to work even more so that I can think of more lazy solutions to problems, and then maybe at the end of the day, then that becomes a good solution. So that's my personal strategy, because I know myself now, and I think it's very normal human to be like that. So I don't really have any sort of ritual. But what I do, what I've done also the last few years is I try to create frameworks for myself so that I don't have to think about the same problem too often. So that means that, if I get a problem and I already said no to it one time, I'm not going to think about it again. I know the answer is no. So I don't want to think about the same problem 4 or 5 times in a row unless this is something that I need to attack in a specific way. So that's if this is, let's say there's an investment in biotech, or someone comes to me and I've already figured out that I don't know biotech that well. I need to spend a lot of time if I'm going to figure it out. Either that I need to, so then it's probably the answer is going to be no for me investing in it, unless I know there are a few other constraints into it, which then will make that decision easier. So then I get an email, okay, I'm immediately no, yes, or kind of, it's just a decision-making tree.
Cool. You do it in the written, some kind of structure you did for yourself?
I have some of it, but most of it is just in my head, where I'm just okay, I already know where this is going to be headed. So, and then I try to be super stringent about that. But now, I guess with AI, ChatGPT, I guess I'm trying to learn to be even more, to use it as more of an advisor, or like where I'm just going to be like reading it into it, like all of the frameworks that I have, and then eventually if I keep like, if I'm in the middle, then I guess I might ask it, what would I do? And then I get the answer.
Yeah, exactly. And just one more small, I forgot to ask you about. After the time you've been representing Norway in several like esport games, like it was Warcraft and Dota, right?
Yeah, Warcraft 3.
Yes, Warcraft 3. And then after that you started this Nordic community of esport. So, and also Axie Infinity is a kind of a community as well, right? The universe. So what is that community part means to you?
It's funny. Because the Axie, the Warcraft 3 communities and the Dota stuff, like it happened like, over time, where I was involved and I got more involved. And I think that it gave me, over time, there's problems, right? People are people, people have many different type of backgrounds. The people that play games, some of them are incredibly smart, some of them are not smart, some of them are passionate, some of them are not passionate. It's like a very broad spectrum of many, many different humans, right? So you try to, you learn over time what's a good idea to probably say or not say. I wouldn't say that I have two different personalities, but I have a more refined personality in business where I'm much more aggressive. And then I would say that I have a part of my personality which is more community focused, is more kind of diplomatic. It's like a politician almost, where even though my natural tendency is always to be as direct and transparent as I can, I think that sometimes I have to be more diplomatic, because if you're not, then people have a tendency to read into what you're saying in the worst possible way, because there's like a lot of asymmetrical information at play where they don't know everything that you do. So if you assume that, they will understand the thing in the same way that you do, then it's just not happening, right? So, and I think that's, it's weird, because that's like many consumer facing companies I think have to face if they have leaders who are outwards facing. Everything you say and do will be read in a different type of way, which makes it quite difficult. So you have to learn that over time.
But you learned that when you were working in the government part, right?
No, it was a separate. It's more very related to community work.
Okay.
Yeah, and even then in Axie as well, where some people like me, some people don't like me. I think we all play our different roles in that community. Where if you're too direct and seen as strict, then that's not a good thing. Then we have my other co-founder Jeff, who's very cheery and bubbly and friendly. People like that for him. So we have different roles to play, and I think all of that kind of works together to build an interesting community where people can recognize themselves in a leader in some kind of capacity. So I think it's a lot about understanding that if you're trying to build a community of people, it's like what is your role that your persona is playing in that community, and try to not be too aggressive in any way, because then people will be like, oh, this is not what we like to see, right?
Where do you see yourself in 10 years and the company?
So my feeling on Sky Mavis is that there's $1 trillion opportunity here, but it has to come from actually first winning kind of the gaming space, getting as many users into crypto through gaming, and from there on out they have their wallets and they will use that for remittances and payments, so we can challenge Visa. I think that's kind of the long tail vision for Sky Mavis. For me personally, yes, I'll definitely try to be as part of it as much as I can, but it also depends on like where are we going to build the company. There could be a possibility that maybe I can't be because I'm here in Norway, because if I want to even spend more time on Sky Mavis, there are tax rules here which could be a little bit challenging as well. So there is that. I would assume that I'm somewhat involved with Sky Mavis in 10 years. I'm not sure if it's going to be the same capacity. I think every founder, at the end of the day, they have to also see an opportunity where things cannot be that personal, dependent on you. I'll probably be a part of the board at least. I still see that.
Do you feel it will be easy for you?
No, definitely not, because this is my life's work, right? So of course not. But I could easily see myself building the Ronin ecosystem or building Sky Mavis, even just from outside of kind of the core side. I always think that I will kind of be pushing to create value for the shareholders that we have. But, there could be something there as well, because, life changes. I travel quite a lot now. I think last year I had like 100 travel days. That is, I'm not sure if it's necessarily a good fit with being like having a family here, doing those things as well. So I probably want to spend more time in Norway trying to see if I can build something here as well, whether that's an investment company, another startup here in Norway. I guess we will see.
This is exciting. I'm looking forward to follow. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you for having me.